Hello and welcome to CodeSlicing. And have I got an exciting episode for you today? Yes, is the answer to that question, because we're going to be talking about inner shadows, which we all know are the best kind of shadows. In fact, I love inner shadows so much that I've already done 3 episodes on that topic, covering text, views and shapes, and images. Now, the reason I had to do 3 episodes instead of just 1 is because of the way the blend mode modifier interacts with the various modifiers involved with generating the effects. And that never really felt that stable to me because it depended on the SwiftUI implementation under the hood, which we know changes rapidly. Recently, I was watching a video by a bloke I follow relentlessly. I literally never miss one of his videos. He's always giving me great tips that improve my life immeasurably. In this one, he was talking about the compositing group modifier. Listen carefully to what he has to say about it.
This kind of thing can really throw you for a loop in SwiftUI if you're not ready for it. Intuitively, we would expect the white in the middle to stay white since it's on a white background and we're just reducing its opacity. What's actually happening is that it's applying the opacity to each capsule individually, meaning that we can see some of the black capsule coming through the white one. Adding a compositing group modifier solves this problem and we get the behavior we're expecting.
Well, that sounds like exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for. So I thought to myself, could I combine these 3 approaches with the compositing group modifier and come up with a sort of overarching inner shadow extension to rule them all, if you like? Well, it turns out you can do that, and I found a way of doing it, which is a relief because that's presumably why you're here. So now that I've excited you enough for this episode, I think it's about time we got on with it, don't you? Before we dive into the rest of the video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any future videos. Now let's get into it. Rather than take the extensions we made in the previous videos I've done on this topic, we're going to start from first principles and build the only inner shadow extension you'll ever need. So while at this point I would normally be recommending you watch the other videos to bring you up to speed, I'm actually going to suggest that this is the only one you need to watch. Of course, I'll be happy if you did watch them. In fact, do watch them, since you might find them interesting, with the caveat that I'm not sure they'll still work given how SwiftUI has changed since I made them. But you don't have to if all you want is an inner shadow solution for SwiftUI that works and that should continue to work going forward. In order for our solution to be robust, it needs to work in a variety of situations, of course. What have we got here? A text field, a text editor view, a large bit of text, a rounded rectangle shape, a view containing layers of things, a massive SF symbol, and an image of dots. And all these views are being decorated in some way with my favorite gradient. And to those views, you can see that I've applied our inner shadow modifier in anticipation of what's to come. As always, the source will be linked in the description if you want to have a play around. Right now, this inner shadow modifier just returns the thing it's modifying, but we'll be able to see the effect it has on all these different views as we progress. I've added several useful parameters to this function that we're going to need as we develop our extension. And first, we're going to be using the shadow radius and the opacity in order to generate the shadow itself. So let's get down to business. The first step is to create a shadow color based on the opacity parameter, which is a value from 0 to 1, corresponding to no shadow and a black shadow, respectively. So first, we need to clamp the input to ensure it's valid. So the opacity is equal to the opacity clamped with a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 1. And now instead of self, we can return the color like this. Return color.white with an amount of 1 minus the opacity. Great. Don't worry about the layout being messed up at this point. We'll be addressing that once we've sorted out the shadow itself. On top of this color, we're going to overlay the color of white and mask that to the view by passing self in here. And now the magic of inner shadows is revealed by blurring the white overlay, allowing the shadow color to bleed through the edges. And we're going to blur it with the shadow radius. Okay, I agree, that doesn't look very magical. So let's mask the whole thing so we end up with a shadow constrained to the views we're modifying. And there we go. This is the foundation for our inner shadows. We're going to use this shadow, lay the original view on top, and blend it with the multiply blend mode to give the effect we're looking for. But let's talk about this layout problem first. Obviously, we don't want our inner shadow to affect the layout. That would be extremely annoying, and the reason we have a problem here is that the shadow color here is a greedy view. In other words, it takes up all the space it can, unlike a variety of the views that we're using in our example. So we need to change that to adopt the behavior of the view we're modifying. This is surprisingly easy to do by either using the overlay or background modifier. To understand why, let's take a listen to one of the findings from a video I made recently showcasing the differences between Z-stacks and overlay/background modifiers. Therefore, the difference in these two approaches, other than clarity concerns, is that when using overlay and background modifiers, the frame of the modified view remains unchanged, which could be an important consideration when defining your layouts. And that sounds like the kind of thing we want to take advantage of here. And we're going to use the background modifier. We can't use overlay because we need to keep the original views at the front so they can be interacted with like the text field and text editor views we've got at the top here. So I'm going to cut all this and say we're going to return self background and shove the shadow we cut in there. And as you can see, this has solved the layout problem nicely. But where have our shadows gone? Don't worry, they're still there. They're just hiding behind our views, which is precisely where we want them, because now we can apply the blend mode modifier here, set it to multiply and stand well back. As you can see, the text field, text editor and image views are looking terrific, but the text, shape, layered view and SF symbol are not faring so well. You see, that video I mentioned at the beginning of the episode regarding compositing groups also explained that the blend mode modifier affects all the views it can get its hands on. We want to restrict that behavior, starting by making the bit that makes up the shadow itself a compositing group. Right, that's sorted out the shape, but we've still got problems with the text, the layered view, and the SF symbol. Why are we having trouble with those ones? This is due to the fact that the views we are modifying are themselves complex views with structure that we can't see in the final render. The multiply operation is acting on all of those to give us this unsatisfactory result. See, if I set the foreground color of the SF symbol to white, it works as expected. The same goes for text, and as for the layered view, the blend mode is being applied to all the individual rounded rectangles, giving us this unsightly result. Let me just get rid of that because we want it to work regardless. What we want is to say that we don't care how these views are made up internally. We want the view as it looks with all the layers flattened to their final state to be treated as one thing as far as applied effects are concerned. And we do that by using another compositing group modifier on the view itself before doing anything else. So let's add another one right here. And would you look at that? It actually looks like we're done, but celebrations at this point would be a little premature. To see where we're coming up short, I'm going to change the background color of the entire scene to be nearly black. Not good. By now, I'm sure you have a pretty good idea what's going on. Yes, that blend mode is extending beyond the view we're directly modifying and modifying our view with the background color, making everything almost black. And if you listen closely, you might be able to hear another compositing group stampeding to the rescue. But where do we put it? Well, we put it right after our blend mode modifier, which restricts its effects to the confines of our inner shadow extension. So that would be right here. And that is essentially our inner shadow extension complete, at least with the basic inner shadow. Let's make use of the remaining parameters to tie things off, specifically the offset of the shadow to give it a direction, just as you can do with the normal shadow. Since we're using our white blurred mask to reveal the shadow layer underneath, in order to offset the shadow, all we need to do is offset that white mask. So we can just take the white blurred bit and add an offset modifier like this. Offset x, y. It really is as simple as that. Let's test it out with our text. So we can say inner shadow, pass in 5 for x and y. And the result is a beautifully offset inner shadow. Also, with a darker background, we can make the shadows more obvious. So let's increase the opacity of the other views to 0.8 and give them a little offset as well. And just to remind you what it looks like without, let's set this back to 0. And then once more with the shadow. Absolutely brilliant. Just imagine the kind of effects you can produce with this flexible yet simple modifier. I hope you found that useful. Let me know if you did by hitting that like button and consider subscribing if you want to see more of this kind of thing. If you have any questions, comments or suggestions, please leave them below. But in the meantime, my excellent friends, thanks for joining me and I'll see you next time.